Hi, I love pancakes. I love them. I loved them when I ate high carb, and I love them now that I'm low carb. And I don't think I could have stayed on this way of eating for over 2 years if I couldn't have pancakes. Now, I have unashamedly been on the prowl for the perfect pancake recipe. And probably months ago, I came up with a low carb pancake recipe. It's called Christie's Perfectly Puffy Pancakes, and they were featured on a friend's blog. I don't have my own blog. And so I wanted to make those with you today, but I also wanted to go through kind of what I was thinking when I do this. So I just did a video on baked goods and what items I use and why, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. If you want to know about that, then certainly go to that video. It's 17 minutes long. But we're going to start with buttermilk. Now, I'm going to do my own buttermilk, and I was inspired by a recipe that my kids love that's full of carbs. So what I've got is a cup of heavy cream. It is a full cup, and I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of vinegar. You could use 2 tablespoons of lemon juice if you prefer. You could certainly use the apple cider vinegar from the Mother, which is usually what I use. Somehow I ended up with this. Put it in there, mix it up. It's going to get thick and lumpy and wonderful, just like buttermilk. And do that first and set it aside, okay? Because that vinegar and that heavy cream need time. See how thick that is? It need time to kind of get to know each other a little better. So set that aside. Now that we have that doing its thing, let's talk about the flours we're going to use. Okay, in the other video, we talked a lot about structure and what each kind of flour brings to the table. I'm going to use a cup of almond flour. This is finely ground almond flour, and it's just a cup. We're going to use some other things in here too. If you don't have some of these ingredients, don't worry about it. I'll give you substitutions. Protein powder. Protein powder is really, really important. Now, I can't substitute the almond flour right now. We'll get back to that. But protein powder is really important. You can use whey protein. You can use egg white protein. This gives it the structure because there's no gluten in the almond flour. Usually, when I'm using a cup of almond flour, I can use 1/3 to 1/2 cup of protein powder. This is the vanilla flavor, which is perfect for pancakes. You can also buy it unflavored. I'm going to use a little more than 1/3 cup, if I have it in here. That's not quite 1/3 cup, if you can see. And then, okay, that would make up for what I missed, and then a little bit more. So let's say 1/3 cup and 2 tablespoons, if you're counting. Now I'm going to tell you, it doesn't have to be so exact. And if you don't believe me, just kind of try it yourself. Okay. In addition, I'm going to use for my pancakes some pork rinds. Now, if you don't have the protein powder, you can just use the pork rinds. Pork rinds, it will not taste like pork rinds, I promise. If you don't like the way pork rinds taste, no worries, it's still really good stuff. I'm going to use 1/3 cup, a generous 1/3 cup, and all I've done is take unflavored pork rinds, ground them up, and it makes a flour. The pork rind gives it kind of a gelatinous consistency. It really is great in pancakes, waffles, and other baked goods, sweet or savory. And you know I use pork rinds when I make my squash casserole. I use it as a substitute for breadcrumbs. Okay, so far I've got almond flour, protein powder, and pork rinds. If you don't have pork rinds, leave them out. If you don't have protein powder, you don't have to use it. Throw in an extra egg, which we'll get to the eggs in a minute. Another thing that you can use is unflavored gelatin. Knox unflavored gelatin is available at Walmart and most other grocers. It's easy to find. This is a grass-fed beef gelatin. I like it. I order it from Amazon. It is a little pricey. Do you have to use it? No. So if you don't have it, no worries. I'm going to add, because I've got the pork rinds, I'm not going to add as much. I'm going to put 1/2 teaspoon. Now, I'm not following Christie's Perfectly Puffy Pancake recipe. I will link to that. It is a reliable recipe, so I will link to it. But I'm trying to show you kind of how I can, quite honestly, make it up as I go along and what kinds of things I consider. Now, oat fiber. Again, this may be a strange ingredient you don't have. If you don't have oat fiber, don't worry about it. If you want to use a substitute, use coconut flour. Coconut flour is thirsty, just like this. and it works pretty well. I'm only going to use a tablespoon because I've got other things providing some texture. So I'm only going to use a tablespoon, and a little goes a long way. Oat fiber, if you haven't heard me talk about it before, gives a wonderful mouthfeel. It's still gluten-free. It's a fiber, so it's essentially 0 carbs, no impact on blood glucose. All right, those are all the potions I'm going to put in terms of flours for now. We need fats, we need a milk or cream, and we need sweetener, and we need our eggs. So let's look at the fats. I'm not going to use my hazelnut oil, and I'm probably not going to use coconut oil unless I just need it. What I've done is I melted 4 tablespoons of butter. This is just salted Kerrygold. And so I'm going to put my Kerrygold in. If you'll notice, you can put this in a bowl to mix. I'm putting it into my blender, my Ninja, so for ease, just so that once it's all in there, I can blend it up with no worries. I'm also going to use yogurt. Now, if you don't have whole milk yogurt, and whole milk yogurt can be hard to find, this is one of my favorite because it's so low carb. There's no added sugars. It's 8 carbs total per cup. I'm going to use a half cup of this. It is wonderful stuff. If you don't have it, use full fat sour cream. Full fat sour cream is actually fewer carbs than this. It's wonderful. So I'm going to use a half cup. I'm actually going to use a measuring cup to keep me honest because I am terrible about measuring stuff. And yes, I do have a dog at my hip, very interested in what I'm making. So there you go. There's a half a cup of full fat yogurt. Good stuff. Okay. What else do we need to put in here? Well, we're going to add our buttermilk last. Remember, we made that first, but we're going to add it last. I am going to add some baking powder. And I'm going to add 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. So that's one. I'm using a half teaspoon measure. That's a full teaspoon. There's another half. So 1.5 teaspoons. Because I've got the vinegar in the buttermilk, I can take advantage and use my pure baking soda. Some of you are probably having a conniption and saying, I can't believe she's adding that and she's already added some liquid. It's really okay. And there's a half teaspoon of baking soda. I'm not going to culinary school. Probably wouldn't do well if I did, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to add 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And I'm going to add my vanilla extract after this. Now, I'm one of those folks who thinks you just cannot overdo the vanilla extract. Most people would be happy with a teaspoon. I'm going to do what my grandmother would do. I'm going to do a teaspoon and an oops. And you can see that spilling out a little bit. That's the oops. We need sweetener. Don't let me forget that. You almost let me forget the sweetener, guys. Sweetener. Okay. Use your favorite. You can use erythritol, which I'm going to use a little bit of erythritol for bulk. I'm going to use 1/3 cup. And in addition to that, I'm going to use some liquid sucralose, Easy Sweets. If you don't like that, use, and I've just used about 8 drops, maybe more. I should have counted that. If you don't like liquid sucralose, then don't use that. Use stevia. That would work fine too. All right, let's put in our cup of buttermilk, and I'll show you kind of what it's doing. See how lumpy that is? Just like buttermilk would be. It's definitely been getting to know each other in there. And again, I could do this simply in a bowl. I don't have to use my Ninja. What I like about it is I can just pour the batter from this container onto my griddle, and it just makes it easy and makes cleanup pretty easy too. Okay, so let me get all that in there, and then we'll blend it up and give it a taste. Oh, forgot my eggs. I'm making a terrible mess. Let me add the eggs in here. Now, once I get it all mixed, I'll taste it and see kind of what it tastes like. I might have to add some more fat. If I do, I'll add coconut oil. Or I could melt more butter, but I'll probably stick with coconut oil. I need to wipe my hands. My husband didn't get that clue. I'm like, towel. Like, I need to wipe my hands. So hold on. Let me put this on here.
I won't wipe my hands.
It's hard being my assistant, being a minion for me. The pay is horrible. Actually, the pay is not too bad. He gets to sample the foods that I make. Okay. Well, I still need to pull this out. And the good news is it sticks to the cabinet. The bad news is it sticks to the cabinet. I have used this thing before. Okay. Okay, so we've got it mixed up, and we'll give it a little bit of a taste. I think it's fine for sweeteners, and honestly, it has a cake batter kind of taste. I think we're going to be great. At this point, I could add more sweetener. I could add a little cinnamon, which I really love to do with pancakes. I could thin it just a bit, but I don't think it's necessary. So I'm going to take this out, and let's pause again, and I will bake these up in just a minute. Hi. Okay, we've got everything mixed up. Let's get busy cooking these up. Almond flour cooks really fast, and so you don't want the heat too high. And I always make a mess of the first batch, so I have to tell you, I'm nervous about cooking these and videotaping at the same time, but we'll see. I've made a fool of myself before. I'm using about a half cup of batter and not making them too big. Low-carb pancakes are kind of notorious for not holding together really well. The other thing to remember with this is I mixed it and then let it sit for just a bit. The longer it sits, the thicker it gets. And what you'll notice that is kind of different with low-carb pancakes, if you've tried them, is that they're bubbling. I don't know if you can see it or not, but there are little bubbles on the surface. Usually getting those bubbles is something that you enjoy only when you're doing high carb. So anyway, these bubbles mean that it's rising. The baking soda and the vinegar and the baking powder are all kind of working together with the other ingredients. I hope somebody was writing that recipe down because it does not match Christy's perfectly puffy pancakes. But again, I did that on purpose so that you could see that you don't have to be so exact and you can substitute ingredients. I also wanted to point out I'm frying these in ghee. Now this is it's clarified butter. You can make your own clarified butter. This happens to come from Trader Joe's. I love ghee. Even people who can't eat butter or have dairy allergies can usually use ghee. Because the milk solids are removed, ghee doesn't burn the way butter does. And certainly I could use butter here, I could use coconut oil, but ghee gives it a great buttery flavor without having the risk of burning the solids. I'm just letting these go. Honestly, it's fairly thick, but it's taking a little longer to brown up than I expected. I had this little guy here. We can flip him and you can see they're getting really golden. You do not want to use a high heat. The almond flour and other ingredients will simply burn. And so slow and easy, which is a little different than traditional pancakes, but you don't want to use a really high heat for this. Okay, that little guy's done. While I'm waiting, and this one will flip in just a bit, and I may pause and come back, but while I'm waiting, people ask too, what do you eat with your pancakes? Certainly maple syrup is not an option. There are some low sugar or sugar-free maple syrups that my family has enjoyed. Some of them have maltols and other alcohols, sugar alcohols that cause gastrointestinal distress. So we use those, but not a lot. If you can use them without issue, then great, enjoy them. I really like to use my fruit sauce, and there's a recipe for fruit sauce, a video that I've already done. I really like to use a fruit sauce. I also like to use peanut butter. I think peanut butter with pancakes is really good. And to me, they're sweet with the sweetener and a little cinnamon, so I really don't know that I need a lot of syrup with it. There are also recipes to make your own honey. There's a sugar-free honey. So there's any number of things that you can eat with the pancakes. You can also use this to make a savory breakfast sandwich. Add some bacon, cheese, eggs, and have a pancake sandwich, kind of like a McGriddle, but a healthy version. All right, let me see. Our little mini guy is done. Let me see if I can flip this other one. I don't want it to burn. I am nervous about that. Okay. Ooh. And it did flip okay. But you can see you don't want to make them too large because they're fairly delicate. And that looks like a pretty darn good pancake, even if it was carby. And you can, I don't know if you can see, but it's getting kind of fluffy. There's bubbles there. And I think the texture on this is going to be really, really good. I'm going to give that another minute or so and then flip it. That's all I'm going to do. I'm going to add some ghee from time to time. I'll add more batter, and then I'll have a stack of pancakes. And these are probably about 4 inches across, maybe. So they're a decent, respectable size. Oops, let me see if I can flip that guy. Just be patient with it. And again, even a lower heat, I've got it on as low as it'll go for my settings, but even a lower heat wouldn't be a bad thing because you want to make sure it gets done. And once it's golden on that side, we'll do some more. Like I said, the first ones are usually the hardest to do. And I'm going to pull this out of the way to a less hot part of the griddle. You can see how warm that is. Like I said, if I could turn it down, it would be ideal. But they're pretty forgiving. Okay, I'm going to pull some ghee out there, put on a little more, and then we'll take those up. And anybody want to try a pancake? I wish we did have a cooking show, you know, like Rachel Ray. We could bring people up and they could try a pancake or two. Let's take this guy up. And then we'll take this guy up. And they're really kind of pretty. Let me put a few more out there. Again, we don't want them too big so that we can turn them. I've heard some people say silver dollar size. These are a little bigger than that. Get fancy with it. Okay, here's my stack of pancakes. I did calculate the carb count for the original recipe. I have not for this. This is a great option if you don't want to have the eggy flavor. Now, let's cut these guys. We'll see what we got inside. Wow, they're pretty puffy. Okay, I'm gonna try a bite, and then you can try your own. Hope you enjoy pancakes. They're better than the original recipe. Hope you enjoy them with your family.